Fall Guys was the game to be playing last August. That flash in a pan craze which managed to swallow up every single corner of the internet, every single brand wanted a piece of the pie, and the amount of players which flooded into this game which was really not expected for this much success. That all got started a year ago today, and I think it's time to have a little bit of a retrospective look at the game. It was a simple enough concept to get the grasp of. Presentationally, it was really appealing, and it was something new. It was practically poised to be accessible to basically anyone who understood what a basic video game was. Talk to anyone about the game now though, and chances are they'll mention how quickly it died off, how it was plagued with problems that dragged the game down from second one, and was ultimately killed by the rise of Among Us a measly 3 weeks later. But what if I told you the game was poised for another, much longer stint of popularity? Contrary to popular belief, Mediatonic didn't just abandon the game once they saw a decline in players, and have been consistently updating the game with significant updates every month and a half or so. Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Neremik, and I think it's about time we talk about Fall Guys in relative depth. So what is Fall Guys? Might be a question you ask if you've never heard of the game in all of its hype last summer. Fall Guys is an unconventional spin on the Battle Royale genre, taking cues from the massively popular programs, at least they were a decade or so ago, Wipeout and Total Wipeout. Each round is some sort of obstacle course, some challenge to overcome, and only so many contestants out of the 60 can qualify each round. There are different types of these rounds. Races, in which the first however many players to cross the finish line will qualify. These are typically what you'll be starting your game off with, and they're a chaotic scramble from beginning to end most times. As time has gone on, the quality of these maps has only gotten better and more creative. Then there's survival rounds. There's one central obstacle and you have to avoid it long enough for the timer to either tick down or for enough players to have been eliminated. I think the prime example is something like Jump Club, which was very clearly lifted from Wipeout. You're tasked with jumping over this spinning blade as to not be hit in the slime below, or something like Rhino Rumble where you need to dodge charging rhinos for pretty much the same purpose. These can also be really fun rounds, albeit some of the easy ones can drag on a little long. These two modes are essentially the bread and butter of Fall Guys. To spice things up though, there are hunt modes, in which you'll need to hunt for a specific item within a level. These have two variants, point-based, in which you'll need to dive into rings and bubbles to increase your score beyond a certain threshold, or tail tag, in which you'll need a tail on your character when the time hits 0. You grab other players to nab one, you get grabbed and you lose yours, you get the gist. Controversial opinion, but I think these modes are also pretty alright. Luck is a little bit of a factor here, but there is still fair game for skill and strategy to prevail, just like in all the other modes. There's also one logic mode in the game. It should speak to itself that there's a reason why they haven't added any more of these, although I guess the mode is challenging on occasion. Then there is the community's least favourite mode, team games. The players will be split into either 2, 3 or 4 teams and have to score points. Whichever team comes last gets eliminated in its entirety. This can be a variant of tail tag, lighting up tiles, capturing eggs. If it can be measured in some capacity by the game, it's probably been made into a team mode already. These can often be cited as run killers since you're dependent on the rest of your team for a good outcome. But then, if you manage to weasel your way through all of those different rounds, you get a finale round. This is simple, only one person can win, and they do that by being the first to either reach the end, or the last man standing. Some of these maps can definitely be a cause for frustration, but a solid 75% of the selection here is a really good way to end each game. This is kind of what the game's starting point was. I don't really have enough time to get into each individual round from Season 1, but there's a general idea for what each round entailed in case you were in need of a little bit of a refresher. Participating and doing well in games can also reward you with kudos, fame, and crowns. You get kudos for simply participating in the game, and you get crowns for winning those games. Both of those can then be taken to the in-game store and spent for cosmetics. Fame is also earned dependent on your performance in each show. This will level up something called the Fame Path, which you might be more familiar with calling a Battle Pass. This has all sorts of goodies to unlock, whether it be kudos, crowns, or different cosmetics, emotes. It's pretty much all stuffed in there, and there's one new version of this each new season. At its absolute core, that's Fall Guys, a series of different rounds that play out until there's one person left standing, with a general goal of each season to level up the Fame Path. Compile that with some appealing graphics, a low learning curve, and a banging soundtrack, and you've got a game poised for online success. It's no secret that despite the things Fall Guys had going for it, it died really quickly. And I think in order to see why it's due for another burst in players, you should probably take a look back at the reasons as to why it fell out of relevancy so quickly. Number 1, the anti-cheat was awful. Hackers were a major problem in the game's early life and could ruin your enjoyment of any given round. Some would even stay hidden until the final round or give themselves only slight advantages to make the burn of losing to one sting so much more. Mediatonic really wasn't prepared for the influx of hackers, and so there was a severe lack of anything getting done about this for months. Number 2, it wasn't free. That might sound a little on the nose, every game costs money to make, so they need to make that money back. That's true, but when a major competitor comes along and is equal in size, and just so happens to be free on mobile devices, that initial barrier to entry isn't so grand, especially since these two games share by and large the same type of player base. Number 3, glitches. Normally I'd say this was a negligible point to make, but the player base really wasn't happy with how glitchy the game was at launch, specifically in the final rounds. Full Mountain had a problem where grabbing the crown wouldn't register, Hexagon had you hexa going to an early grave by clipping through the tile geometry, and Royal Fumble, and by extension a lot of the tale-based minigames, suffered from severe latency issues, which led to a lot of really unfair losses. Number 4, a lack of round variety. This kind of speaks for itself. The game launched with 23, bumped up to 24 stages, with an average of 5 being played per episode if you made it to the final. Things started to get old fast, and that was only exacerbated by rounds that really weren't designed so well. DoorDash and Gatecrash are an absolute yawn fest. It's the same ordeal every time, nothing gets shaken up, and they really aren't visually interesting. Block Party is laughably easy every single time you play that first or 1,000th, and Full Mountain definitely earns the nickname of RNG Mountain for a very, very prevalent reason. Number 5, team minigames. This kind of just added to people's frustration with all the other problems, and people were vocally against seeing these modes so frequently. Plus, a meta appeared so that all the other teams could gang up on the one in last place. And when it happened to you, oh boy did that set some people off. People really weren't happy about having to rely on other people to guarantee their success later in the game, and to combine that with a few other issues, yeah, this became a very big source of frustration. Last but not least, server issues. The devs were not prepared for so many people to suddenly be piling into their game, and so for the first few crucial weeks the servers would go down or be unstable really infrequently. Worst case scenario, you'd be disconnected in the finale. They had all this attention, but yet the game couldn't bolster it at all, and these 6 things were what really began to drag the game down from relevancy. The game wasn't in its best state when it launched. I don't think anyone is going to claim that it was. And with the time it took for some of those issues to be fixed, people quickly started shifting to the alternative. Once that freshness began to wear a little thin, the game just got boring to a lot of people fast. And I think that Steam charts graph shows this pretty damn well. Just as quick as it rose to its superstar status, Fall Guys was flatlining in the face of a game with a lot less of these issues, and that was more accessible. People were still playing though. What the people over at Tonic Towers had was inherently good in design, but it just needed time. Time that it wasn't allowed due to its unexpected rise to fame. It was confirmed the game would be getting seasonal updates, and true to their word, Season 2 released in October of 2020. Welcome to the lowest point in Fall Guys. Because the game was dead, Among Us was in full swing, stealing a vast majority of the player base and online coverage, and the Season 2 update did very little to improve the game and earn back those lost players. For clarity, in the background the server issues had long been fixed, but no one was really needing all that extra server space now. Team minigames had been toned down, but anyone that was going to leave because of how prevalent they were had already left. People were still ultimately worn out on the game despite those few fixes. Fixing them still was an improvement, don't get me wrong, but people really needed a fresh experience that could steal the major thunder of its competitor. And in retrospect, I'm starting to wonder if that could have been possible or not. Season 2 introduced 5 new maps, but it did really little to shake up the variation. Night Fever is a pretty good map, with some fair challenge and is leagues better than something like DoorDash. Multiple different challenges and a generally nice flow to it makes this one pretty good. OnlyFans, which was tragically changed to Big Fans in the official release, is another fine map. It's got some smart ideas to it, the variations can make this one really hard, and the risk-reward factor of either waiting for a fan to move around to the next platform or to tightrope walk along the inner beam is an excellent addition. It's a pretty alright map. Wall Guys is the standout map of this season though. It's difficult. You need to maneuver these blocks into position so that you can climb over these walls, requiring a little bit of teamwork in order to pull off. It's definitely chaotic due to that factor alone. Couple that in with random spawn points for each block, and a different amount of each block in each round too, it's probably the only map out of the bunch that I enjoy consistently. Hoopsie Legends and Egg Siege don't get the same glowing review though. Hoopsie Legends takes the game of Hoopsie Daisy and makes it into a solo hunt mode. Much like in the original, gold rings award 5, while white rings award you 1 point, and you need 6 overall to qualify. The movable blocks make a return from Wall Guys to help you reach a few hoops you wouldn't be able to otherwise. And in concept this should be fun, after all the original mode it's lending from is. But no, it's just boring. The urgency of every ring counting is gone here, and it becomes a slog of finding a gold ring to qualify each and every time. It's just kind of meh. I don't actively detest it, but I don't enjoy it either. This is not the type of round the game needed right now, especially after the backlash that the team games got last season. Egg Siege makes me want to commit arson. Egg Scramble was an experience, and this is very much the same mode, just with a new coat of paint. The original map had all the problems with maneuverability, especially when getting in and out of each team's goal. You would think that this would be fixed, but no, Egg Siege came along and made this problem 10 times worse. I'm fine with the additional stage hazards, I think they're neat, but this tiny little gate thing at each goal's exit is so finicky to try and work around if you're carrying an egg. If you don't have one, you can jump over it just fine, but if you're one of the unlucky souls who decides to steal from another team, you have to try and thread it through the hole or throw it over. Mind you, this is on an incline, so if you mess up, the egg is going to roll back down into the pit. Yeah, for a mode which basically depends on your ability to steal eggs from other teams in the latter half, it completely fails to make that aspect of the mode fun, enjoyable, or possible in some instances. That single error stops what should have been the improved larger map an absolute misery to play. Season 2 didn't revive the game. In fact, I'd say it was the final nail in the coffin. This is really where the player count started to plummet, and it's not hard to see why. It was a decently long wait, and the payoff ultimately wasn't worth it for a lot of people. What you've got to consider is that Mediatonic never planned the game to end up being as big as it was, and their team really wasn't big enough to accommodate the new expectations that came with that newfound popularity. Throughout this entire time though, they were hiring, but Season 2 came at a time where that new workforce simply either wasn't there, or settled in enough to produce anything substantial. Until recent years they had just been a web and mobile developer, and while their throwaway into the console game market certainly worked wonders, the immediate spike in popularity made it impossible for Season 2 to be an overwhelming success, and have a timely release. There was some groundwork being done though, introduced around the same time with round variations, typically introduced in the mid-season update along with 1 or 2 other rounds. These will alter different levels in some minor way. Most commonly they'll swap out one obstacle for a newer, less expected one in its place. That stagnant round variation was at least being tackled in some way, and it made some modes that had previously been cheesed have a brand new breadth of difficulty than them on occasion. It didn't make brand new maps, but it did make for a few more interesting experiences, which I'm all for. Another piece that was laid out was new shows. Up until that point you could only play the main show, but in Season 2, limited time modes or LTMs were introduced. These would spruce up the show order in some new way, sometimes focusing on a single map over and over, sometimes just the new rounds, sometimes just survival, sometimes just race rounds, sometimes just round variations, you get the idea. While not being a substitute for the core experience, it at least offered this little side dish to spruce things up from time to time. Season 2 might have been a failure, but things were being set up to make sure the future updates were a whole lot more interesting. And this is where it gets interesting. Season 3 came out at the end of 2020 and brought with it 7 new rounds. Unlike Season 2, almost all of these rounds were pretty good. Tundra Run and Freezy Peak are 2 genuinely challenging race rounds, Freezy being one of my favourites in the game. 2 really fun team minigames were introduced here too. Snowy Scrap and Penguin Pursuit have you either holding penguins or rolling giant snowballs around to gain points incrementally, and the absolute chaos that these rounds can entail is phenomenal. Yeah, you might still be reliant on your teammates, but at this point the algorithm for choosing rounds was so diluted, getting a team game was actually kind of a nice change of pace. Skiffle is the final normal round that was added, and is a hunt mode similar to Hoopsie Legends, only now you need to aim for moving rings down a slippery ice slope. It's as interesting and as fun as it sounds, and it lends itself for some pretty good variation. It also added a much needed new finale, as the game had been operating on the same 4 since its launch. Fall Mountain, Hexagon, Royal Fumble, and Jump Showdown are fine. The game could have survived with this round of finales for a little longer, but I found that towards the end of Season 2, I and a lot of other people were getting particularly sick of Fall Mountain and Hexagon just due to how many times we'd played them. And then comes Roll Off. Roll Off takes the idea of Roll Out and gives it the finale treatment. There's only 2 cylinders, which increase to a much higher final speed. The slime also rises the longer the round goes on, creating an extremely skill-based and fun finale. It really was, and still is, a highlight to look forward to, and is my personal favourite finale, maybe tied with Jump Showdown. Thin Ice is my least favourite round in the game. It's yet another finale, and is simply a bad, more RNG heavy hexagon. Instead of disappearing after 1 touch, the Thin Ice tiles vanish after 3, and each layer is directly on top of their last, with there also being 3 layers. Essentially, the first minute or 2 doesn't matter, since you're getting down to the layer that actually matters that entire time. This is the only round that gets an audible sigh out of me whenever I see it come up. At least with Fall Mountain I can attempt to dodge the randomly fired balls at me, but this really does just feel like luck of the draw as to where you end up. Don't let this drag down the rest of this update's rounds though, everything else is still really good, if a little winter themed. We're not done yet though. While the round variety noticeably increased with this update, something else was added which gave the game a lot more longevity. Crown ranks. Every time you earn a crown, no matter what the source, it contributes to a separate sort of unlockable path complete with its own unique cosmetics. Whereas the previous goal for each season might have just been to get enough fame or crowns to fill out that season's battle pass or buy that skin you liked, now there was a long-term goal that required a lot of wins in order to achieve. Each rank past a certain point required multiple crowns, and you need close to 900 to unlock every reward there is here. Needless to say, if you had a need to flex on people with your exclusive Gold Wolf outfit, this definitely dragged you right back in like it did me. Season 3 was the first step in bringing Fall Guys back to at least some level of relevance. It stops the free fall of players and viewers it was seeing with Season 2, and Mediatonic clearly did still see potential in updating the game because there was clear effort put into things. Considering now they had had time to scale their team up to manage a game this big in scope, approximately increasing from 35 to 150 people working on this game alone, they'd taken the first steps to enabling crossplay, being brought out by Epic Games, and they'd been listening to the community. The game was getting better. Out of the 6 things I believe caused the game to decrease in popularity, 4 of them had been solved. Glitches were severely reduced in number, the hacking problem had by and large been eradicated, as had all the server issues, and the team minigames weren't as invasive as they once were. All that leaves is a lack of round variety, though that was soon not to be the case, and the initial price of entry. Mind you, that is only a problem so long as Among Us, or another free game, is currently a major contender in this specific market. You might get the feeling something was ready to pop off again. And you're right, a few more rounds would make this pool varied beyond belief. They just needed more rounds for this next season to be the one. They did not just settle for a few more rounds. Previously you could queue up with your friends, but ultimately you were always competing against each other. They introduced a squads mode. Qualifying is handled differently here. Individual placement in races awards points, and this is put into your team score. Each team's score is then ranked, and the top however many squads will qualify. Survival rounds are also here, with one bean earning 1 point per second whilst they're alive. If all your beans survive, you'll come first. If not, each bean lost will result in less points being earned per second and potentially eliminating you. It's a pretty solid system for all things considered. Finally, you can actually play with your friends rather than against them. Less skilled players had a chance to be carried to victory. It's perfect. But you are 4 more times likely to win. So surely they won't give your whole squad a crown each time, right? No, instead there's a new currency added for winning, crown shards. Collect 60 and you get a whole new crown. It's a little bit of a clever system if I say so myself. This was accompanied by daily challenges which could also award them. They aren't anything particularly hard, but they're a nice thing to have and work towards. There's also one challenge per day that awards fame instead, unless you've maxed out the path for that season, in which case it'll give you more crown shards. These 2 inclusions already make Season 4 a good season, but what sealed it were the rounds. 7 were added, all of which, bar 1, had this beautiful neon-esque aesthetic to them. I'll go worst to best for this one, although I have a feeling ranking them might be a little bit harder than I expect. Big Shot is a new survival round where you're on a seesaw and have objects fired at you. It can dip into the slime if too many people are on one end, so it becomes a challenge of dodging the incoming projectiles and managing the seesaw too. It's pretty average, it's not that hard. Basketball is probably one of the best team mini-games the game has ever added. You grab a ball and throw it into the other team's hoop to score. It's one of the few 2-team mini-games in the game, and it's pretty fun once you get the hang of it. Apparently Mediatonic felt there weren't enough 2-team mini-games too though, since Power Trip is exactly that. You need to light up tiles in this one, with the team that lights up the most qualifying. To do that you need to be holding a battery, but there will never be enough for everyone to have one. It can lead to some really good moments with some close calls, and it's one of those rounds that really does depend on your teammates, though it still feels like you can make a significant difference if you play your cards just right. If you took Roll Out and made it a race mode, you get Roll On. Yeah, these names are starting to get confusing. This is a pretty difficult round if you're not careful, and I'll stand by that. It's a nice reusing of old assets that blends together to make something relatively new, although it doesn't follow the rest of the season's theme as a result. Something entirely new though is Short Circuit. It has 2 laps and the difficulty here is insane. Lots of obstacle variety, a cool new gimmick and lots of room to master this one makes it a really satisfying round to play if you know what you're doing. The 2-lap gimmick kind of gives it a Mario Kart-esque feel to it. It's a pretty fun map to play. Talking about shaking up the formula though, Hoverboard Heroes is not a typical survival round. The hoverboard you're on moves through a series of obstacles, and if you land in the slime, you get eliminated. But there's a set finish line, so it kind of blends the survival elements with the race elements to make something pretty decent. It's not exactly stellar, but it's a nice little variation here and there. There's a decent selection of rounds so far, but there's 2 that really make this the best season yet. Skyline Stumble does so many things right while doing almost nothing wrong. It's difficult, it's got multiple paths, a little bit of teamwork at points, and it flows really well. I think a round like this was a good way to test the waters for a much more difficult round later down the line. I personally think it was a really good idea, apparently the rest of the community did, so we got that much more difficult round in the 4.5 update. Slime Scraper is the best round in the game. It takes its cues from Slime Climb, being a race round anyone can qualify from, with an ever-rising ocean of slime that will eliminate you. Yeah, it's kind of like Hoverboard Heroes, except instead of being a survival with race elements, it's a race with hints of survival elements. Slime Climb was already a really popular map, being one of the few that got extremely high praise in Season 1, and that still holds up really well all this time later. So making a follow-up seemed like a slam dunk, right? And oh boy it was! Everything that made Slime Climb's frantic scramble so enjoyable is here in spirit, with the difficulty increased up to 11 for good measure. If you mess up, it can be all over. This level is unforgiving, it's fun, and it damn well loves to whistle down the remaining contestants. If you can master this map, you'll be reaping the rewards for weeks and weeks to come. Season 4 was the update the game needed to cement itself back on the rise. The quality that each of these rounds came with, the continued additions to spice the game up, and the rounds that were pretty unforgiving led to a season that was fun. Season 3 retained me longer than Season 2 had, but it wasn't exactly a regular habit just yet. Season 4 very much made Fall Guys a regular habit of mine, and my friends by extension. If Season 3 signalled the end of the decline, Season 4 is what made the game begin to tick upwards again. All they had to do was keep the momentum. And that brings us to where we are currently. Coming off the heels of Season 4 came the jungle-themed Season 5. The new major addition this time around is duos and trios. Previously, you only stood a chance in squads with a full squad, and needing to rely on a random that may or may not disconnect isn't everyone's cup of tea. But now you have a chance to pick just how large your squad is to accommodate your group size. Rewards scale accordingly, since these modes are statistically harder to win, and it's been a pretty pleasant experience from what I've played so far. The other main addition is that of limited time events, which has been trialled with the Ratchet and Clank skins. You complete a series of challenges for points, and these points level up a mini fame pass of sorts full of related cosmetics and rewards. It's actually pretty creative, even if some of them might have been unnecessarily hard. It's cool, this is the only chance you'll have to get these cosmetics, and paired that with the new release of duos and trios, and maybe, I don't know, slipping in a few challenges related to said modes, it's a nice way to have people try them out. As per the course, there was a new fame path and set of rounds too. Treetop Tumble and Lily Leapers are both phenomenal racetracks with a fair bit of skill involved, along with a few risky side routes. Bouncing on lily pads is extremely satisfying to pull off, especially if you can chain them together for your whole run, and the 2 concurrent routes in Treetop Tumble is really cool. The whole top route is bloody hard, so do be warned on that end, but luckily the bottom route is still a viable option here in the name of fairness. Bubble Trouble and Penguin Pool Party are some very chaotic hunt modes. You either love or despise them for that reason alone. If you like hunt modes and the uncertainty that they carry around with them, you're in for a good time. If not, the best you can really do is try. Stomping Ground is a very challenging and unpredictable survival round utilising these rhino guys. It's a love-hate relationship with this one because they run on AI. I like that there's a chance for bouncing off lily pads if you get flung out the arena. It's a nice way to ensure that you don't always get eliminated when you're flinged, but it's not so frequent that it makes the mode laughable. The mode isn't exactly perfect. I think the AI could definitely be improved, as sometimes all 3 will hone in on a single player sending them, basically with no chances of survival. But for what it's worth, with a little bit of tweaking, this could also be a pretty decent round. But I think the highlight of Season 5 has to go to Lost Temple, the new finale. It's not thin ice, so it already gets points on that front, but it also excels everywhere else too. There's 36 rooms in the map, and just like in DoorDash, you need to burst through doors to find the next room forward. That path is randomised. Sometimes there's 2, sometimes there isn't. Each room has its own mini obstacle you'll need to clear in order to reach each door. Those are random too. Just like Full Mountain, you'll have to grab the crown to win. Yeah, it's really chaotic in all of the best ways. There's skill mixed with RNG elements to make a provably fair round that anyone can win with enough patience. I love roll-off, but I know someone with less experience probably doesn't stand a chance at winning that. But this? Yeah, it's not too difficult, and if you're lucky, everyone else might just pick a one dead-end door, giving you the lead. It's one of the best finales in that game based on those merits alone. The season did actually introduce a few more glitches than usual. I think the crown grab glitch has came back into circulation, and I think something like that should be mentioned in the name of fairness. But on the whole, Season 5 continued the momentum Season 4 picked up, which is exactly what it needed to do. It didn't need to add anything overtly extravagant. It just needed to refresh the player base while larger things were being worked on in the background, and I think it's done that really damn well. Season 4 was the season to address the final thing that killed Fall Guys, but I think Season 5 is what solidified this as a game on the mend. The anti-cheat was finally implemented and working well. Among Us had long since began its descent out of relevancy, meaning its competitive pricing didn't give it as much of an edge anymore. Glitches had by and large been eradicated, although that isn't always the case. Rounds were finally feeling varied and had more of a challenge to them, and some factor I can't exactly pin down made them feel just more fun with each new season. Team minigames took a back seat, making the games feel more fair, while still offering that little bit of randomness to spice things up, and the server issues were long since a thing of the past. Everything holding back Fall Guys is gone. But even beyond that, there were so many new additions alongside those remedies which improved the game considerably. The increase from 40 to 50 levels in each Fame Pass, countless crossovers, crown ranks, different shows, squads, limited time events, daily challenges, crown shards, and custom lobbies have made Fall Guys into a game with actual longevity to it. And there's still more to come. With the promise of a Switch and Xbox version, cross-platform parties, continued updates, and a slow but steady rise in average players, I think Fall Guys is currently going through a revival. Will it see the peaks it had this time last year again? I doubt it, but I do think it's carving out a core audience that will keep coming back for more, and that will continue to get bigger. I mean, who knows? It's consistently outperforming its main contender. Its main contender, which allegedly killed it the moment it came into relevancy, is now behind it in the Steam concurrent player stats and in the concurrent Twitch viewer stats too. I've started to see people get more and more nostalgic over the time they spent playing Fall Guys last summer, and now that they're opening the game up to 2 brand new consoles, one that quite literally looks like the perfect match, excuse the pun, for this game. I mean, if they play their cards right, they might even be able to release it just before Christmas. It seems like there's a lot in Fall Guys' future, and that Mediatonic definitely still have a few more hands to play in slowly but surely bringing back that initial player base. All it'll take now is one big content creator to play the game, and it'll cause a domino effect of people piling back in, either playing the game or to create content for it. There's so much more on offer than what there was at launch, and there's no doubt in my mind that if Fall Guys were to have an extra boost in popularity again, people would be sticking around for much longer this time. The mistakes that Mediatonic made were learned from and improved on. And while I'm not going to sit here and claim that it's suddenly a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination, I do still think it's at least a pretty good one. And it seems like there's still a whole lot more to look forward to as well. Okay, outro time. I'm going to keep this one short and sweet because the video's already getting quite long. First and foremost, any footage that I couldn't get myself came from this channel you're seeing above me, and they'll also be in the description. Just because of the randomness of how modes were chosen, I couldn't get footage of certain ones, and luckily, Mr. Fall Guys YouTube channel over there did come in handy for that. Second of all, hopefully you did enjoy this. If you did, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. I wanted to try something new with this. I personally really like Fall Guys. I saw the anniversary was coming up in like 2 days and got to work on this, so sorry if it was a little rough around the edges and whatnot. But no, I really do enjoy Fall Guys. I think it's a grand old game, and I do truly believe all of what I said in this video. No, I believe all I said in this video, actually. But yeah, no, don't worry, big reviews are still coming. I just kind of wanted to do this to make sure I was still kind of up to speed in editing them, and, you know, kind of like bridge the gap between the big ones, because those guys take a while. And I think that's everything. Yeah, honestly, this is going out on the anniversary, which is something I did not think was going to be possible, but no, here we are. And once again, if you did end up enjoying, feel free to like, comment, share. I really do want to know what you think. Do you think the game is getting revived? Do you think it's maybe going to stay at the current level, or do you think it's destined to fail? And if so, why? I'm down to hear. Yeah, it's crazy to think that the game has been out a year, but what they've managed to pull off in that year, I think, is genuinely impressive, having to upscale this team by, like, what, close to 5 times? It's cool. Here's a toast to the game's future success, and hopefully many more years to come of really good content. I really do want the game to succeed, and hopefully, if there's any main takeaway from this game, maybe you should give the game a little try. And, you know, maybe you're bored, you want to find a game to play, you know, you'd be surprised at how much new stuff has been added. I know this video pretty much covered everything that ever has been, but, you know, hey, you'd be genuinely surprised at how much fun the game is compared to when it launched. But I think, well said, all that aside, hopefully you've enjoyed this. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. My name's been Neremik, and peace out.